The boat sits under a weathered tarp in my grandfather's old boatyard, a silent testament to time's relentless march. 30 years of New England winters haven't been kind to her. The white oak planks that once gleamed with fresh varnish are now gray and splintered. My grandfather's last words to me were about this boat. "Promise me you'll restore her," he said, his calloused hand gripping mine with surprising strength. "She's got many more years of sailing in her." The damage is extensive. According to the surveyor's report, almost every major component needs replacement. The keel is rotting, the ribs are cracked, and the planking is beyond repair. Modern shipwrights tell me that between 50 to 80% of the original materials will need to be replaced, a statistic that feels like a physical blow. Each piece that needs replacing raises the same nagging question. If I replace every plank, every rib, every nail and bolt, will it still be my grandfather's boat? This isn't just about wood and brass and bronze. It's about something deeper, something that philosophers have grappled with for over 2,000 years. It's about identity itself, about what makes a thing remain itself through change and time. As I run my hand along the worn tiller, smooth from decades of my grandfather's grip, I can't help but wonder, at what point does restoration become replacement? At what point does the original fade away, leaving only a replica in its place? The answer matters more than you might think. It's not just about boats or buildings or artifacts. It's about us, about how we persist through time, despite every cell in our bodies being replaced every few years. And as we stand on the brink of an age where we can replace nearly every part of ourselves, from organs to memories, these questions are becoming increasingly urgent. So let's solve this puzzle together. Let's dive into one of philosophy's most enduring paradoxes, one that started with an ancient Greek ship, but speaks directly to the heart of who and what we are. Because in the end, this isn't just about restoring a boat. It's about understanding what it means to remain yourself in a world of constant change. The story begins in ancient Greece, with a ship that carried a young hero named Theseus home from Crete after he slayed the Minotaur. According to Plutarch, writing in the 1st century, the Athenians preserved this ship in their harbor for hundreds of years. But here's where things get interesting. As Plutarch tells us, the ship wherein Theseus sailed was preserved by the Athenians down even to the time of Demetrius Phalereus. They took away the old planks as they decayed, putting in new and stronger timber in their places. This simple act of preservation sparked one of philosophy's most enduring puzzles. As Plutarch writes, quote, "This ship became a standing example among the philosophers for the logical question of things that grow, one side holding that the ship remained the same, and the other contending that it was not the same." End quote. In other words, if you replace every single part of something, piece by piece, is it still the same thing? The question hits home as I hold my grandfather's old wooden rudder in one hand and its newly crafted replacement in the other. The original is weathered, its surface textured with 1,000 tiny cracks, each one telling a story of storms, weathered, and quiet afternoons on calm seas. The replacement is pristine, cut from the same species of white oak, shaped to exactly the same dimensions. But something feels different. I reach for my grandfather's logbook, hoping to find some guidance. As I flip through the yellowed pages, his neat handwriting reveals something unexpected. According to his meticulous records, this original rudder I'm holding isn't original at all. It's a replacement he installed in 1986. And the keel I thought was original? replaced in 1992. The stem? 1988. The discovery stops me in my tracks. All this time I've been agonizing over preserving the original boat, when in fact my grandfather had already replaced most of it himself. Each entry in the logbook tells the same story. Identify the worn part. Carefully measure and document it. Craft an exact replacement. Install it with care. The boat I remember from my childhood was already a Ship of Theseus, maintained through decades of loving restoration. This revelation adds another layer to our puzzle. If my grandfather's boat was already a product of continuous replacement, what exactly am I trying to preserve? The physical materials, the design, the function, the meaning? As I dig deeper into the logbook, I find a note from my grandfather that suggests he wrestled with these same questions. On the last page, in handwriting that seems shakier than the rest, he wrote, "A boat is more than wood and bronze. It's the stories it carries, the skills passed down in its maintenance, the memories created on its deck. Each replacement piece isn't just new material, it's a continuation of the story." But this still leaves us with our central question. If we accept that continuous replacement can preserve identity, as my grandfather seemed to believe, where do we draw the line? What actually makes something remain itself through change? The answer, it turns out, might lie in an even more perplexing version of the paradox, one that takes us into the very nature of identity itself. Just when I thought I had made peace with replacing my grandfather's boat piece by piece, I received an email that turned everything upside down. Tom, a local boat restorer, had been collecting and preserving all the original parts I'd been removing. Not just storing them, documenting their exact position and relationship to each other. And now he dropped the philosophical equivalent of a depth charge. He plans to rebuild a second boat using only these original materials. This scenario isn't just a modern twist. It's actually the second part of our ancient paradox, added by philosopher Thomas Hobbes in the 17th century. Hobbes asked, if someone collected all the original planks of Theseus's ship and rebuilt it alongside the continuously restored version, which would be the real ship? The restored vessel with its new materials but unbroken existence? Or the rebuilt one, constructed from the original materials but assembled anew? The implications hit me like a sudden gust of wind. In a few months, there could be two boats, one maintained through continuous restoration, the other reconstructed from original materials. Both would have equal claim to being grandfather's boat. Consider classic cars. When a 1967 Shelby Mustang undergoes restoration, the original parts are often preserved and sold. According to research by automotive historians, there are documented cases where multiple authentic versions of the same classic car exist. One maintained through continuous restoration, another rebuilt from original parts. Each commands similar prices at auction, suggesting that collectors value both forms of authenticity equally. Research published in the Journal of the Violin Society of America indicates that many famous Stradivari have had nearly every part replaced over centuries of use, while their original materials sit in museum collections. Yet performers still pay millions for these continuously restored instruments, believing they maintain some essential quality of the original. The concept at play here is what philosophers call spatio-temporal continuity, the unbroken existence of something through space and time. It's why we consider ourselves the same person, despite our cells being completely replaced every 7 to 10 years. According to research published in Nature, an average person's body replaces about 330 billion cells every day. Yet, our identity persists through this constant renewal. As I watch Tom carefully cataloging each weathered plank and corroded fitting, I can't help but feel that something of my grandfather lives in these original materials. The worn spots on the tiller where his hand gripped it through countless summers. The small repair he made to the bowsprit after that storm in '82. And yet, when I step back aboard the restored version, with its mix of old and new materials, something else of my grandfather persists there too. The way the boat moves through the water, the careful attention to maintaining her lines and balance, the continuation of the skills and knowledge he passed down, these all feel equally authentic, equally real. Perhaps that's the real insight here. Maybe authenticity isn't a binary choice between original materials and continuous existence. Maybe it's more like a conversation between past and present, between physical substance and living function, between what we preserve and what we renew. Seeking answers, I started visiting other boat restorers along the New England coast. Each had their own philosophy about authenticity and preservation. Mike in Mystic believes authenticity lies in maintaining traditional building techniques, even if using new materials. Sarah in Cape Cod argues for preserving as much original material as possible, saying, each weathered plank holds a story. But it was James in Maine who introduced me to something that changed my entire perspective on the puzzle. Have you heard of the Ice Grand Shrine in Japan? He asked, showing me photos on his workshop wall. This ancient Shinto shrine has stood for over 1,300 years, yet every 20 years, they completely dismantle it and build an exact replica right next to it. According to Smithsonian Magazine, this ritualized rebuilding, known as Shikinin Sengu, has been happening for around 1,300 years. The fascinating part? The Japanese consider each rebuilt shrine to be identical to the original, not a copy, but a genuine continuation of the same shrine. This idea of identity persisting through complete material replacement isn't as foreign as it might seem. Consider your social media profile. According to research published in the Journal of Computer-Mediated Communication, the average person's social media profile undergoes almost complete content replacement every 2 years. New photos, updated information, different connections. But the most striking example might be closer than our phones or ancient temples. It's in our own bodies. According to cell biology research, our bodies replace approximately 330 billion cells every day. Over the course of 7 to 10 years, nearly every cell in our body is replaced. This revelation hit me particularly hard one afternoon as I was sanding one of the newly replaced planks on my grandfather's boat. I realized I was asking the wrong question. The real puzzle isn't about what percentage of original material remains, or whether a rebuilt version would be more authentic. For the ice shrine, it's the continuation of sacred tradition and craftsmanship. For our social media profiles, it's the ongoing narrative of our digital presence. For our bodies, it's the persistent pattern of our consciousness and memories. My grandfather understood this intuitively. Looking back through his logbook, I notice he never agonized over whether replacing a plank made the boat less authentic. Instead, each repair entry focuses on maintaining the boat's character, its handling, its essence. This perspective aligns with modern philosophical thinking about identity. Philosophers now often speak of four-dimensional objects, things that exist not just in three-dimensional space, but also through time. Under this view, my grandfather's boat isn't just its physical form at any given moment, but the entire continuity of its existence. The implications of this reach far beyond boats and temples. As we enter an age where we can replace or enhance more and more parts of ourselves, from artificial organs to brain-computer interfaces, understanding what carries identity through change becomes increasingly crucial. Perhaps the answer lies in seeing identity not as a fixed state to be preserved, but as a story to be continued. Each replacement, each change, each adaptation becomes not a threat to authenticity, but another chapter in an ongoing narrative. The moment has finally arrived. In my hands, I hold the last original piece of my grandfather's boat, a small section of the transom bearing his hand-carved builder's mark. According to his logbook, he carved these initials on a spring morning in 1975, the day he completed the boat. Now, 49 years of sun, salt, and weather have taken their toll. The wood is soft, the grain lifting. It needs to be replaced. But I hesitate. This piece feels different from all the others. Not because it's more authentic. We've already established that authenticity isn't simply about original materials. No, this piece feels different because it represents a threshold. Once I remove it, none of the original physical materials will remain. The boat will be like the philosopher's axe. Same handle, same head, neither original. I trace my finger along my grandfather's carved initials, feeling the grooves his chisel left behind. According to research on human tactile memory, published in Neuroscience Quarterly, our fingertips can detect features as small as 13 nanometers, about 1/7500th the width of a human hair. In that infinitesimal space between my fingerprint and these carved letters, memories flood back. The smell of his workshop, the sound of his laugh, the way he'd tell me, measure twice, cut once, every single time we worked together. The new piece sits ready on my workbench. I carved my own initials below his, creating a physical representation of what this boat has become. A bridge between generations, a continuation of craft and care. According to maritime historians, this practice of adding restoration marks dates back centuries. On HMS Victory, Nelson's flagship, researchers have documented over 200 years of builder's marks, each telling part of the ship's ongoing story. As I prepare to make the switch, I think about the broader implications of what we've learned. In an age where we're wrestling with questions about artificial consciousness, digital identity transfer, and the nature of the self, the Ship of Theseus has never been more relevant. If identity persists through complete physical replacement, what does that mean for consciousness uploading? If meaning resides in patterns and relationships, rather than materials, how should we think about artificial intelligence? The sun is setting as I finish securing the new transom piece. The replacement is complete. By traditional measures, this is no longer my grandfather's boat. Every original piece has been replaced. And yet, as I step back and look at her lines, watch how she sits in the water, something undeniably essential remains. The next morning dawns clear and cool, perfect sailing weather. As I raise the newly restored mainsail, I feel a familiar tremor through the tiller. The boat responds just as she always has, heeling gently into the wind. The wake curls exactly as I remember from childhood, that distinctive pattern my grandfather would point out, saying, "That's how you know she's trimmed just right." According to research published in Maritime Archaeology Quarterly, boats develop unique response patterns based on their design construction, and maintenance history. These patterns persist through restoration if the work is done carefully, maintaining the vessel's essential character. A pod of dolphins surfaces nearby, their sleek forms arcing through the waves. I remember my grandfather telling me they were good luck. Looking at their graceful movements, I realized something profound. Just as these creatures maintain their pattern while constantly moving forward through the water, identity itself might be more about motion than stasis, more about continuation than preservation. The boat cuts smoothly through the morning swells, everything working in perfect harmony. Different materials, same soul. New parts, same story. In the end, my grandfather's boat isn't defined by its physical components, but by the relationship between craft and craftsman, between past and present, between one generation and the next. It's not about what remains the same, but about what we choose to carry forward. As the sun climbs higher and the coastline recedes behind us, I find myself smiling. The boat beneath me might be composed of entirely new materials, but its identity, its essential character, remains unbroken. Perhaps that's what my grandfather understood all along. A boat, like a person, like life itself, is not a static thing to be preserved, but a story to be continued. The Ship of Theseus paradox isn't just an ancient philosophical puzzle. It's a lens through which we can examine some of the most pressing questions about identity in our modern world. As we've explored through my grandfather's boat, the nature of identity and authenticity is far more complex than simply maintaining original materials. It touches on fundamental questions about who we are and how we persist through change. Before we end, I want to leave you with some questions to consider. Puzzles that extend the Ship of Theseus paradox into different aspects of our lives. First, think about your smartphone. You've probably replaced the screen protector, maybe the battery, possibly even the display. If you gradually replaced every component of your phone, at what point would it cease to be your original phone? Or would it remain the same phone as long as it maintained your personal data and settings? What exactly makes it yours? Your body replaces approximately 330 billion cells every day. According to cell biology research, almost every cell in your body is replaced every 7 to 10 years. Given this constant replacement of physical material, how does the Ship of Theseus paradox relate to your own personal identity? Are you the same person you were a decade ago, when you were made of entirely different physical material? Imagine a future where we can upload human consciousness to digital form. If we created a perfect digital copy of your mind, would that copy be you? Would it have the same claim to your identity as your biological self? If not, what would it be missing? This isn't just science fiction. Companies like Neuralink are already working on brain-computer interfaces that raise similar questions about the nature of consciousness and identity. Research in neuroscience shows that every time we recall a memory, we slightly alter it. Our memories are less like perfect recordings and more like stories we retell ourselves, changing slightly with each retelling. How does this affect our understanding of personal identity? These questions may seem abstract, but they have very real implications. As we develop new technologies for enhancing and extending human capabilities, understanding what carries identity through change becomes increasingly crucial. Whether we're talking about artificial organs, brain-computer interfaces, or digital consciousness, the Ship of Theseus paradox helps us navigate these complex waters. In the end, my grandfather's boat taught me that identity might be less about maintaining original materials and more about continuing a story, preserving patterns, relationships, and meanings through time. As you ponder these questions, remember, the goal isn't necessarily to find definitive answers, but to better understand the nature of identity itself and what it means to remain ourselves in a world of constant change.